Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to talk about 5 things that every eyeshadow enthusiast should know. I've been doing eyeshadow for about a year now, and these are just some things that I've picked up along the way as far as how to store my products and get the best longevity out of them. So if you're interested in hearing any of that, I do hope you'll stick around. If you're new to my channel, hello, my name is Rachel. I'm a homeschooling stay-at-home mom and I love to play with colorful eyeshadow. If you're interested in seeing lots of colorful content in your timeline, I hope you'll consider liking and subscribing because currently I'm uploading about 3 videos a week, and this eyeshadow look was filmed and I'll link it below for you. Okay, so let's talk about the first thing, the eyeshadow itself. Now, as far as I'm aware of, this pertains to both eyeshadow as well as pressed pigments. I'm just going to say eyeshadow to cover both of those categories, but did you know, because I did you know that eyeshadow expires? I really never gave it a second thought. I never thought about the fact that colored powder would expire, but if you think about how it's formulated, there are different elements that are added to make it smoother or to make it more metallic or to make it blendable or whatever they have to do as far as actual formulation. And so it would make sense that those pigments or elements or chemical reactions might alter over time. And I've heard people say that they're using a palette that's a couple of years old and it's not blending as well as it used to, or it's not building as well as it used to, or it just, you know, a formula that they used to know and love and that they knew well no longer performs the way that it did. And that simply would be a matter of expiration, I suppose. So on the palette itself, I'll show you I just grabbed the Garnet palette from BH Cosmetics because that's one of the palettes I use for my eye look. And I'll bring this close to the camera so you can see. There's a little picture of a tub with like an open lid, and then on the tub is written the word, and this one, for example, says 24 months. Hopefully you can see that. It says 24 months, or 24M. And basically, most shadows, I believe, are categorized as 2 to 3 year lifespan. The idea being, of course, that the formula will change and age over time, so it's not going to perform as well then as it did when it was first produced. Now, as far as I'm concerned, I'm probably going to have my palettes for a long time. I don't know how much that's going to affect me, but it's something to be aware of, especially if you have a larger collection, and especially if you're considering buying a lot of palettes, you might not actually get a chance to get the most benefit out of most of those products before they start to expire, because how much eyeshadow can we actually use? I mean, I put eyeshadow on 3 to 4 times a week, and I'm still never going to get through all of what I have, and still considering buying more. So yes, we declutter, yes, we give away or sell or whatever, but it's just something to keep in mind when you look at your collection of maybe 50 or 100 palettes, like these are going to expire. Maybe it would behoove us to be more conscious about spending and say, I actually want to use what I've got because I might love these palettes and I would rather use the ones that I love while they're still good than go and buy more and more and more and just add to my collection and never get most of the life out of these products. Now, along the lines of the product itself, it's really important that we know how to store our eyeshadow. This is actually new information for me. I had my eyeshadows stored in my bathroom cabinet, like above the toilet on the back wall. It wasn't above the sink, but it was still in my bathroom. I actually had a friend over. Her name's Adriana. She might be watching. If so, hi, Adriana. I was showing her my eyeshadow, and she's like, oh, you keep them in your bathroom. I'm like, yeah, it's really convenient because, you know, I usually do my looks here, and the mirror is right there, etc. But then I thought about it later, and I was like, wait, maybe I shouldn't keep them in my bathroom. I hadn't ever thought about it. But I looked it up and the internet was like, yeah, you definitely shouldn't keep them in your bathroom because, and this is kind of a duh, eyeshadow is powder. And when it comes in contact with moisture, it's going to start growing mold or bacteria, and that's a problem. And so keeping your eyeshadow in your bathroom is really not a good idea because there's so much moisture from the toilet, from the sink, especially if you have a shower and you're taking like steamy showers and the steam gets up into the air. It can really, really truncate the shelf life of your shadow where they're not nearly as long lasting as they would have been if they were stored somewhere else. Also of note, I did realize after my friend and I had that conversation that one of my shadow palettes, the Age of Opulence palette from Beauty Bay, which is all cardboard, actually warped a little bit. Like the cover, when I got it, closed quite nicely and tightly, and now it's got a little bit of a bow in it. So that is moisture. I mean, that's what would make cardboard bow is moisture. Another problem with moisture, besides warping cardboard packaging, is the fact that bacteria can grow in your product. And this is something that we're placing on our eyes. We really don't want bacteria in the product itself, just like we don't want bacteria on our brushes, or we don't want to use a mascara that's 3 years old because you might get bacteria on your lashes. It's just good sense. Like, our eyes are quite sensitive. I think we don't always recognize, like, they can put up with a lot, but if you put the wrong thing on them, you might get a flaming infection, and it's not a good day. So moisture in general is a bad thing. And then I also learned when I was researching the moisture and generally how to store my products, I read that sunlight can also detrimentally affect your product because the rays of the sun can actually start to pull pigment out of the product. Have you ever seen a billboard that's been up for ages, like a really old billboard? It used to be, I don't know, for Coca-Cola maybe, and it was bright, bright red. Like we all know the red of Coca-Cola. And over time and in the sunlight, it has just faded into a dusty, sad, dry, pink sort of color. And of course, the wording has all faded away. And you know, that is all because of the exposure to light. The same sort of thing on a smaller scale will happen with your eyeshadow. The light will affect the pigment. And if you have cream or liquid products, not only can it affect the pigment, but heat and sunlight can also cause the elements of those creamier products to separate. So no longer do you have a nice, cohesive, blended together creamy blush or cream to powder shadow or foundation or something that's all blended up. Now you're starting to get separation, and that's gross. So light in general is not really the friend of your makeup as well. Again, I mainly just have eyeshadow, but these are things to be aware of. And so within a few days of the conversation with my friend, I took all of those products out of my bathroom and I put them in a small end table in my living room. Ideally, they would be against a cooler wall of the house, not against an exterior wall that would be subject to the changes of the environment, but an interior cooler wall in the shadows. And the best place that I found based on my house and my furniture and the fact that my little baby is crawling around and getting into things is, you might be able to see inside this little, it's open, see that? My shadows are right there. Inside this little end table in my living room. It's shadowy, it's dim, and it's not against an exterior wall, it's sort of on an interior wall. So I found that information to be very useful, and really when I thought about it, I realized it makes a lot of sense, but I hadn't thought about it before. And that's why I'm making this video, because maybe you also haven't thought about it, and I would hate for you to see your collection start to deteriorate unnecessarily and too early because of something as simple as where it's being stored. Let's take a moment here and talk about eyeshadow primer. Every time I put on eyeshadow, I use a primer. Before I bought primer, I used concealer. And if you just have a concealer, that's perfectly good. The idea of a primer is to cover up any oil residue that might be on your eyes. It also creates a one-toned blank canvas for the application of the shadows. And it's usually a little bit sticky, so the shadows will adhere better and not smear or fade or crease throughout the day. Now, not all primers are created equal. I started using concealer and that was okay. The first primer that I bought actually was the NYX Professional Makeup Primer in the shade White, and I used this for quite a while. I have learned that this works best for me with ColourPop shadows because ColourPop shimmers are not quite as creamy and putty-like as a lot of my other brands. And so if it's a little bit more of a powdery formula, I don't get creasing as much. And that would, for me, be ColourPop. So if I'm going to use ColourPop, I'll use this primer because creasing is not so much of an issue. But if I use this primer on Glamlight or Udenzai or something that, or Beauty Bay, particularly Beauty Bay, something that has a lot of really creamy shimmers, I'm going to get crazy creasing, and this primer does nothing to help. Now today I'm wearing full Beauty Bay, and I actually have creasing with Beauty Bay shimmers and their mattes. And that was a little bit annoying. That was one thing that made me reconsider whether I wanted to purchase from the brand because I really like the products. Like, it's not my most favorite formula because the mattes are not super buildable, but the shimmers are beautiful. And the mattes are nice. If you work with them in the reverse order where you start dark and work light, they work very, very nicely. And I mean, I think the results speak for themselves. But I had so much creasing. It was like, oh, I have to babysit this eyeshadow look, and like every 20 minutes I have to go like this to try to work out the creases. And that's just a little bit annoying. Then I discovered the Glamlight Icing Primer in the shade White Frosting. I mean, they have several shades, but I buy it in White Frosting. Having a white base makes everything a bit brighter. I've discovered that this primer is excellent for my skin when it comes to helping prevent creasing. If I had used the NYX primer with today's look, it would be creasing right now. Like 20 minutes after I finish the eyeshadow look, it would be creased on me. As it is, because I use the Glamlight Icing Primer, I probably won't notice creasing on this look for another 6 or 7 hours. And when I go to bed tonight, which will be, I don't know, 16 hours after I've applied my eyeshadow, I will have creasing, but that's pretty natural after having it on for so long. And considering that the Beauty Bay formula is the one formula which creases on me universally and a lot, the fact that it can look good for so much longer simply because of choosing a different primer makes all the difference. So I'm using this primer, I'm using it up. Every time I use ColourPop, I grab this one, but I wouldn't buy this again based on my knowledge and experience now. I highly recommend the Glam Light Primer. It's awesome. I don't know how the formulas differ. Like, this one's a little bit more dry and this one's a little bit more tacky and creamy. Aside from that, I just know that this one performs so much better. So if you want to have your eyeshadow looks really pop and be more pigmented, more bright, and have a longer staying power, I really recommend that you get a primer. You can start with something basic like the NYX, or I mean, go on Amazon and just get an eye primer. People swear by P. Louise eye primer and ABH, and I think like the higher end brands have well-reputed primers, but if that's not in your budget, it's okay. You can get decent results with a concealer. You can get decent results with the NYX primer. It's just a matter of what your budget looks like and where you are as far as experience. If you're really starting out, you don't need to go buy the highest end eyeshadow primer because you're still learning and playing and just figuring things out. But if you move forward in your eyeshadow journey and you find that you're doing it a lot and you're practicing and your skills are getting better and now you want to take the next step as far as finished results, then certainly look into getting a good primer. And finally, I want to talk about washing your brushes. This is so important. Washing your brushes. It's super important for a couple of reasons. So here are my brushes. I've got them in a little thing. These are all the eyeshadow brushes that I have. And then I have a separate container with a couple of other brushes, like whatever I've got for my face and brows, and that's it. Yeah, it's mainly these. I do wash those now and then, but I don't use them that often. So these are the ones that get washed regularly. Now let me talk about washing your brushes. One of the most obvious reasons to wash your brushes is because they get dirty. You want to regularly wash that product out because it's going to stain your brushes, because it's going to make them dirty for when you want to use them to apply new looks, and because, again, bacteria will grow. I don't know if you're aware of this, but we all have tiny little mites on our skin and on our eyelashes. This is why they say don't share mascara, because the tiny little mites that live on your eyelashes can get into the bottle of the mascara, and then you go and give it to someone else, and they get your tiny little mites on their eyelashes, and then you can get eye infections. Not fun. So let me tell you how I wash my eye brushes. I have this thing, which I think I got on like an end cap at the grocery store. It's just a silicone mold. It's got a little thing back here to slide your hand in. And what I do is I go into the bathroom sink with all my brushes and I take some water and I fill the part of this little basin with water and I get some mild dish detergent, just liquid dish soap, and I pour it in there as well. And then I'll take the brushes. So let's say I've got the soap on this side. I'll take the brushes and I'll dip into the water, get the brush wet, and just drag a little bit of the soap over and go back and forth on these little nubbies, these little raised nubbies. Instantly, the soapy water is going to start changing colors. And I do that with all my brushes. Then I'll rinse this out and I'll fill it with clean water and I'll dip the brush into the clean water and like go back and forth again to work the soap out of the bristles. And I might need to do it 1 or 2 times to get the soap out of the bristles, particularly with the really fluffy brushes rather than a small or super dense brush, because that's not going to hold the soapy water the same way it doesn't hold color, the way that a fluffier brush does. Anyway, so then this is done and I just rinse this off and set it to dry. And then the brushes, I make sure that you don't dry them like this. So they're all washed, they're all rinsed, and now it's just a wet brush. So first what I'll do is I'll take each brush and I'll kind of fling it like this a little bit because that's just spraying off the excess water. Do not dry it like this because the water will drip down the bristles into whatever glue is holding the brush together. And so after I've shaken off the excess water, I dry it laying flat with the tip of the bristles overhanging into my sink. So the glue is not being affected by moisture, especially this metal part where it meets the often wood part of the stick or plastic, either way. It's usually glued together and I don't want the moisture to make that glue loose because then my brush falls apart and I have to throw it away. So that's how I wash my brushes, and I wanted to mention as often as you should wash your brushes. My recommendation would be that if you use your brushes sparingly, maybe do an eye look a couple times a month, maybe for a date night or a weekend or something, you don't need to wash your brushes super often. Probably once a month is sufficient. However, if you're me and you're doing an eyeshadow look about 50% of the time, I wash my brushes once to twice a week. So it totally is a matter of how often you're using them, But use common sense. I mean, if you're using your brushes once every 6 months, you're still getting bacteria and maybe little eyelash mites or whatever in your brush. So just wash it out when you're done with it, and then it sits clean and stored. I recently heard that if you have cats, sometimes cats like to play with the bristles of your brushes, and that is actually very dangerous because cats have a different variety, I suppose, of bacteria and germs that are carried on their fur and on their tongues and on their paws. I'd seen a comment on a YouTube video. One woman was saying that she ended up having this horrific eye infection, like really awful. She describing it, it sounded horrifying. And they traced it back to the fact that her cats had been playing with her eyeshadow brushes, and she didn't realize it or she didn't care, and then she put her eyeshadow on, and whatever was on the cat got into her eye. So that's something to be really aware of too. If you have cats, you might want to store your brushes inside of a cabinet or something where the cats can't get to them, because apparently cats like to play with that sort of thing. So there you go. That's my video on the 5 things you should know if you're an eyeshadow enthusiast. I found all of these things to be very useful, and as far as helping my collection stay healthy and long-lasting, I thought that this was helpful information. I hope you did too. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget that you can like and subscribe if you want to see more. And until we see each other again, I do hope that you have a really wonderful day. Bye! Okay, so they're all palette. I'm going to show you on the Wilderness. Am I going to show you on the Wilderness? No. I'm not going to show you on the Wilderness. So okay, they're all rinsed. Okay, so they're all rinsed. Okay, so they're all clean, they're all rinsed, now they're just wet, right?